Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really deep look at a nation that is constantly dominating global headlines, yet honestly is just so often misunderstood. We are unpacking the hidden history of modern Iran. All right, let's just dive right into this.
So when most of us picture Iran today, we immediately think of the harsh, religious regime that's controlled the country for decades, right? We see the protests, the morality police, the chanting crowds. And because of that, it's totally natural to assume that the story of modern Iran is entirely about religious zeal. But is it really? Well, if you truly want to understand why this brutal regime exists, and maybe more importantly, how it's actually managed to survive for so long, you kind of have to look way beyond theology. Because the real driver of this nation is this grueling 200-year cycle of power, fear, and just a desperate quest for survival.
Section 1. A superpower squeezed, trapped between empires. To really understand where Iran is today, we have to rewind all the way to the 1800s. Back then, Iran, which had once been this massive civilizational superpower, woke up to a complete geopolitical nightmare. On one side, you've got the Russian Empire aggressively pushing south. They desperately needed access to warm water ports that wouldn't freeze over in the winter, and grabbing Iranian territory gave them exactly that. Then on the other side, you had the British Empire watching all of this extremely nervously. Britain viewed the land around Iran as the absolute vital key to India, which was obviously their most valuable colony. This whole dynamic kicked off what became famously known as the Great Game. Now, neither of these massive empires actually wanted to fully conquer Iran. It was way too vast and mountainous for that. Instead, their strategy was to ruthlessly control the Iranian government from the outside.
Caught right in the middle of this mess was the struggling Iranian Shah. He needed money to run his country, so he started playing these two empires against each other using what are called economic concessions. Essentially, the Shah threw a massive fire sale on his own country's infrastructure. He handed British and Russian bankers, engineers, and merchants these incredibly lucrative monopolies over everything. We're talking railroads, banking, even tobacco. The empires made an absolute fortune, the Shah got his fast cash to fund a pretty lavish lifestyle, and everyday Iranians, well, they were left to suffer, just watching their country's wealth completely flow outward.
But the Iranian people didn't just sit back and take it. They repeatedly organized and fought back for real democratic representation. In 1890, massive protests actually forced the Shah to cancel a 50-year British monopoly on tobacco. By 1905, this incredible constitutional revolution took place, successfully establishing a parliament to basically put a leash on the Shah's secret deals. But then, 1908 happens. Outsiders simply would not allow this democracy to flourish. Russia, wanting to protect its own influence, sent 12,000 troops to support the new Shah. They literally rolled up to the Iranian parliament with cannons, opened fire, and murdered hundreds of pro-democracy lawmakers.
Section 2. The discovery of oil, a valuable resource, changes everything.
Moving into the 20th century, a massive natural discovery completely altered the geopolitical landscape. In 1908, after years of searching, a wealthy Englishman struck oil in Iran. And I mean lots of it. Right at this exact same time, the British Navy was transitioning its entire massive fleet from coal to oil. So overnight, Iran transformed from just a geographic buffer zone into the absolute vital fuel source for British global dominance. This is the discovery that literally led to the creation of British Petroleum, or BP. It also meant that, throughout 2 world wars, foreign troops would constantly occupy Iran just to protect the strategic asset.
During this really turbulent time, a strongman military leader named Reza Shah rose to power. He promised to make the country great again, pushing for secular modernization, building railways, banning women from wearing veils, and insisting the world actually call the country Iran instead of Persia. He genuinely tried to break the cycle of foreign control. But when World War II broke out, he brought in German engineers. The British and Soviets demanded he expel them to protect Allied supply lines. When Reza Shah tried to negotiate and stay neutral, the British and Soviets just invaded the country, forced him into exile, and swapped him out for his highly compliant 22-year-old son, Mohammad Reza Shah. Once again, foreign empires completely dictated Iran's destiny.
Section 3. A democracy overthrown. The 1953 CIA coup.
Following World War II, Iran actually almost achieved true self-determination. The people were thoroughly exhausted by a century and a half of outsiders running their country, and honestly, nothing captured the theft of their nation better than this unbelievably meager number right here, 16%. Out of all the vast oil wealth being endlessly pumped from Iranian soil by the British, 16% is all the Iranian people were getting. That's it.
As you can imagine, the tension escalated rapidly. A wildly popular leader named Mohammad Mossadegh rose up arguing that Iran's oil belonged to Iranians. Simple as that. In 1951, as prime minister, he completely nationalized the oil company. While Britain panicked, they embargoed Iranian oil and sent warships to block the Persian Gulf. When Iran still refused to cave, Britain went straight to the American CIA, warning that Mossadegh might align with the Soviet Union in the Cold War. In response, the CIA spent $12 million to orchestrate a massive, completely secret coup. They bribed politicians, paid off newspapers, flipped the military. Mossadegh was arrested for treason, and Iranian democracy was permanently crushed.
With Mossadegh out of the way, the young, Western-friendly Shah flew back into the country and assumed absolute power. To keep his grip on things, he ruthlessly westernized the nation, imposing Western dress and lifestyles. Anyone who opposed him was silenced. The CIA actually helped him build a brutal secret police force that captured and tortured his critics. He's throwing these extravagant parties in the desert, while simultaneously granting Americans legal immunity within Iran, which, by the way, was a really bitter echo of those humiliating treaties from the 1800s. He was undeniably a foreign puppet, and massive resentment began to boil across all layers of Iranian society.
Section 4. The 1979 Revolution. A nation rises up.
By the late 1970s, a whole century of this deep resentment finally reached a tipping point, and the most vocal critic guiding this anger was a religious cleric named Ruhollah Khomeini. His appeal, and this is crucial, wasn't purely about religion. He perfectly tapped into a century of deep-seated anti-imperialist trauma. He spoke directly to the anger of a nation that felt entirely subjugated by the British, the Soviets, and the Americans. His message of divine justice against foreign oppressors just resonated incredibly powerfully.
The result of this was just astonishing. 40 million Iranians united. Shop owners, students, workers, the religious, everyone took to the streets. Even when the military opened fire, the protests didn't stop. Oil workers went on strike, completely paralyzing the government's revenue. Through sheer force of collective will, the Iranian people managed to completely overthrow an autocratic monarchy that was heavily backed by the world's most powerful empires. In January 1979, the Shah fled for good, and Khomeini returned from exile to literally millions of cheering people.
Section 5. The Unbreakable Regime. A Paranoid System.
So the revolution had succeeded, right? But Khomeini and his followers were absolutely determined to ensure that outside powers like the CIA or MI6 could never, ever orchestrate a coup and steal their country again. To do this, they built a highly specific, totally paranoid system of government. It's basically a filtered democracy. Step 1, the supreme leader sits at the very top as the ultimate guardian. Step 2, religious councils filter the elections, deciding who's even allowed to run. Step 3, they didn't just rely on a normal army, they built the IRGC, a massive, parallel ideological military designed to protect the regime from the inside out. And Step 4, they created proxy militias to project power across the Middle East. Every single layer of this architecture is designed strictly to make the government totally coup-proof.
And honestly, this totally explains their modern behavior, especially their nuclear ambitions. Watching their neighbors and rivals over the last 40 years, the regime basically concluded that if they truly wanted to ensure outsiders would never invade or force regime change again, they needed the ultimate irreversible deterrent. Their pursuit of nuclear weapons and all those aggressive proxy wars are essentially extreme defense mechanisms born directly from 200 years of historical paranoia.
But here is the profound tragedy of this entire story. This highly engineered, coup-proof system was built to keep foreigners out, sure, but it also effectively trapped the citizens inside. Estimates suggest that a staggering 80% of the Iranian population does not actually support this brutal, isolating regime. These are incredibly generous, brilliant people who mostly just want a normal life. Yet, they're crushed under the weight of a system that was fundamentally designed to never, ever yield power. Which leaves us with this vital, final thought. For 200 years, the Iranian people have been caught in this relentless cycle, exploited by massive foreign empires, betrayed by their own monarchs, and now imprisoned by a paranoid fortress of their own making. As outside powers continue to apply pressure, and as internal protests bravely continue to rise, the question remains, can the everyday people of Iran ever truly break this cycle and finally chart their own destiny? It's a complex reality for sure, but hopefully you now have a much clearer picture of the real forces at play here. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.